Welcome back. We have already gone through the technology action plan and also how to put the ambition for the technology action plans. Now this particular presentation is on step 2 of how to prepare a technology action plan, and it essentially looks at how to identify the actions and activities to include in the technology action plans. And we have divided this presentation into 3 parts. We look into this issue of what are the actions and activities that we include within a technology action plans, and how do we select these actions from the majors, and thirdly, how do you identify the activities for selected actions. Now before we go into this issue of actions and activities, we have to be a little bit conversant with the terminology which is used within the TAP guidance, and we have been very much familiar with this idea of majors, which are essentially coming from the barriers and enabling framework analysis, where the majors are the means to address the barriers. Now when we come to the technology action plans, those majors which are taken within the TAP are considered as actions, and we further detail these actions into activities, and therefore the activities are the subset of actions or subset of the actions. I will explain this now, how to we select actions from amongst the majors. At the a priori, we have to keep in mind that this process of selecting actions from amongst majors is a political choice, and this political choice is made within the stakeholder discussions using the stakeholders, and to guide this process in a relatively structured fashion, it is a good idea or a good practice if we can think of some criteria for selection of these actions. And some of the possible criteria could be, for example, effectiveness of majors, efficiency of actions, which is measured in terms of the cost effectiveness, suitability of the actions based on the country context, and the interactions of these actions with other majors which have been proposed within the TAP, or the interaction of the proposed actions with the policies within the country. And also you could take into consideration the costs and benefits of different actions. Now this point would become a little bit more clearer from an example we would consider at this point of solar home systems. Now what you are seeing on the screen is essentially an output from your barrier analysis and enabling framework report, where we have looked into the barriers which a technology faces, which have been put in column number 2, and then the majors which can help us to overcome these barriers. And you might be also remembering from your barriers and enabling framework analysis that we also categorize these barriers into economic and financial, market and so forth. Now when we come to the TAP part, let us take, for the sake of exemplification, economic and financial barriers. So now within the barrier enabling framework report, we have, for example, for these particular technologies, solar home systems, we have identified 3 majors to overcome the financial barriers, and these are expanding access to finance, removing value added tax on solar home systems, and thirdly to standardize power purchase agreements. Now when this discussion is, for example, taken within the country on these 3 majors, the first is easily acceptable to all the stakeholders, but when the discussion comes to the second major, which is dealing with removing value added tax on solar home systems, one of the stakeholders, for example Ministry of Finance, is very much worried about what could be the implications of withdrawal of value added tax on solar home systems, so they take a strong opposition to this. Similarly, the third major is objected to by the utilities. So as a result of that, what you realize is that only one of the majors is taken forward in the TAP, and that is highlighted in red color, expanding access to finance. Now once we have identified actions from amongst the majors, the second step is to go forward and try to decompose them into activities. and the reason for doing this is threefold. Number one is that we don't want that the actions should be interpreted differently by different stakeholders. We would like that the actions are unambiguous. So to remove ambiguity, it is very important to decompose them into different activities. Secondly, it is also important because we are trying to fix responsibilities for implementation of different activities. So if our activities are very well defined, it is easy to define the responsibilities. Thirdly, it will also help us in improved planning and implementation of these activities. Now let us try to explain or expand on this using the same example of solar home systems. Now we found from this in the previous slide that, for example, the action which was prioritized by the stakeholders was related to expanding access to finance. Now what does this exactly mean? So we could divide this into a number of activities which are more specific, more precise, and it could be like we would try to define this access to finance in terms of identifying commercial resources. For example, identifying who are the banks or institutions which will be lending money to the investors in solar home systems. Secondly, we could organize certain risk management tools and techniques, and these could further be training could be provided to the various stakeholders on these tools and techniques in terms of workshops. So this could become a third activity. Similarly, we could have some more activities which could further define more precisely what we mean by expand access to finance. Similarly, within the tab there will be many other actions. In this particular case, let us say that the second action is improve access to products and services. On a similar lines, we could define it into much more specific activities, and this is like, for example, organizing business to business trade shows, identify and track technical advisors, create web-based products and services, and so on and so forth. Similarly, you could go on doing this for all the actions within the tab. Okay, so that completes our part of this presentation, which is related to identifying actions and activities. We have so far covered step 2 of this presentation. The next presentation after this would be on step 3, which is on identifying the stakeholders and defining the timelines for this. Thank you.